One of the quiet assumptions underlying Dungeons & Dragons is that power is everywhere, but access to it is not. Spells, miracles, martial techniques, they exist because the world contains ways of preserving, transmitting, or stealing power. Forget race and class compatibility, it's time to examine the knowledge ecology of the D&D multiverse. So, settle back, grab a tasty beverage, it's time to get deeply nerdy. There are distinct categories of information, tradition, and access to power which form the core of all character classes. This underlying structure can be described as the knowledge ecology of the D&D multiverse, the way power flows through cultures, environments, and peoples over time. Once this is understood, questions like, how can a goblin be a wizard, or where does a warforged learn magic, stop being contradictions and instead become inevitable consequences of the setting. In ecological terms, knowledge functions much like energy. It is generated, stored, consumed, transformed, and sometimes wasted. Some societies cultivate it deliberately, others scavenge it opportunistically, and some are shaped by it so thoroughly that they no longer distinguish between learning and being. Every playable people in D&D exists within such an ecology, whether the text ever explicitly acknowledges it or not. Across all editions and settings, power enters a character's life through a surprisingly small number of pathways. These pathways predate the modern idea of character class and in many cases predate D&D itself as a game. Classes are expressions of these paths, not their source. One of the most fundamental paths is inherited power. Some beings are born already carrying the capacity for supernatural action. This may be divine ancestry, elemental infusion, psionic awakening, fey influence, draconic blood, or the artificial embedding of arcane structures. What matters is not the flavor, but the fact that power exists prior to instruction. Cultures shaped by inherited power do not ask how magic is learned, but how it is controlled. Training takes the form of rites of passage, meditative discipline, suppression, refinement, or deliberate provocation. Power is not something granted by institutions, it's something that must be survived. Aasimar, Genasi, Kalashtar, Elan, Tieflings, Warforged, and countless planar or altered beings fit comfortably here. Even when such peoples later adopt formal training methods, the origin of power remains internal rather than external. At the opposite end of the spectrum lies preserved knowledge. Here, power exists because information survives its creators. Spellcraft, ritual magic, psionic discipline, arcana manipulation, complex martial forms all require reproducibility. Something must be recorded, remembered, or demonstrated accurately enough that it can be passed on intact. Preservation does not require books. Dwarves carve knowledge into stone. Giants encode it into epic poetry. Goblins scratch it into scavenged materials or commit it to memory because writing tools are unreliable. Plasmoids preserve information chemically or experimentally. Memory diffusing through contact and shared existence. Illumians literally wear their knowledge as living sigils. What unites these cultures is not literacy, but continuity. Once a society can say, this works and this is how you do it again, it can support structured supernatural practice. Wizardry, artificing, and disciplined psionics arise naturally in such environments, regardless of whether they resemble a human academy. The familiar image of a wizard tower is merely one cultural expression of a much older principle. Another major path is devotional authority. In these societies, power does not belong to the individual, but is entrusted to them. Gods, spirits, ancestors, cosmic forces, or even abstract ideals serve as gatekeepers. The critical question is not how magic works, but who is allowed to wield it. Clerics and paladins are the most formalized versions of this relationship, but they are far from the only ones. Shamans, oracle kings, spirit mediums, rune priests, cult champions, and ancestral wardens all operate within the same ecological niche. Power flows downward from a recognized source, and legitimacy matters as much as competence. This structure explains both stability and rebellion. When authority is clear, traditions are strong and predictable. When authority fractures, fallen champions, heretics, and renegades emerge, often carrying power that no longer fits comfortably within their society. Such figures make natural adventurers precisely because their relationship with power has become unstable. Closely related but philosophically distinct is primal practice. Rather than being granted power or inheriting it, primal traditions acquire it through participation. The world itself becomes the teacher. Magic arises from lived understanding, repeated exposure, and survival under pressure. Peoples who dwell in marginal or hostile environments often develop this relationship by necessity. Deserts, tundra, deep jungles, oceans, and the Underdark, and shattered planar regions reward those who listen carefully and punish those who do not. Lizardfolk, Thrycreen, Furbolgs, Goliath, and many Fey-touched beings do not separate nature from magic. The two are the same phenomenon, experienced at different scales. Here, power is embodied. It is learned by doing, not by studying. This produces druids, rangers, wardens, and other practitioners whose abilities feel less like spells and more like extensions of instinct and environment. Martial discipline occupies a path often mistaken for mundane, but in D&D it is anything but. Perfected technique, supernatural endurance, impossible feats of strength or precision, and battlefield intuition all represent forms of power acquisition. The difference is that the body, rather than the soul or intellect, becomes the repository. Cultures that value discipline, endurance, or controlled violence naturally produce fighters, monks, barbarians, warlords, and rogues. Training halls, warbands, ritual combat, and survival trials serve the same ecological function as libraries or temples. Knowledge is stored in muscle memory, tradition, and repetition. Once again, the presence of power is undeniable, even if it does not glow or chant. Finally, there is transgressive acquisition. Some power is not meant to be held. It is forbidden, dangerous, or corrosive, and societies build taboos around it precisely because it works. Warlocks, shadow mages, bloodcasters, pact bearers, and many cursed or altered beings arise from this path. Here power is taken rather than given. It is stolen, bargained for, unearthed, or pried loose from things that resist being known. Cultures may publicly deny the existence of such paths while privately producing specialists who walk them. Goblins, tieflings, cursed bloodlines, shadow-touched peoples, and planar refugees frequently intersect with this ecology, because survival has already taught them that rules are negotiable. What matters is not morality, but risk. Transgressive power produces rapid results at long-term cost, and societies that tolerate it tend to do so quietly. Seen through this lens, the idea of the race-class compatibility dissolves. Every playable people supports one or more paths of power, and every character class is simply a structured expression of those paths. A goblin wizard exists because goblin culture preserves knowledge under desperate conditions. A war-forged cleric exists because constructed beings can still stand in relationships of authority and devotion. A plasmoid monk exists because discipline does not require bones. The rules allow these combinations, but the knowledge ecology explains them. Once this framework is understood, the diversity of playable peoples no longer feels like an exercise in mechanical permissiveness. It becomes evidence of a multiverse where power is abundant, but never evenly distributed, and where culture determines not whether magic exists, but how it survives. My name is AJ Pickett. Thanks for listening, and as always, I'll be back with more for you very soon.